Cayman Islands are the three biggest holders of our treasuries. If indeed China is selling treasuries, and they were at 3 trillion. Now they're at just over 700 billion. So they're totally shedding, and they're buying gold instead. And if the Fed, which is the number one holder of treasuries, is China number two for now, if they are quantitatively tightening, letting those treasuries roll off the balance sheet, who the hell is going to buy 10 trillion a year for the next 10 years? It says that we have to do 10 trillion a year. By the way, in February, China dumped 22.7 billion in treasuries. They're dumping treasuries, and that's why rates are rising and buying gold.
In this eye-opening segment, financial expert Andy Shechtman delves into the staggering realities of the US economy. With trillions accumulating in debt at an alarming rate, Shechtman paints a stark picture of a nation teetering on the brink of financial collapse. From the mind-boggling underfunded promises reaching a staggering $175 trillion to the imminent threat of treasuries resetting at higher interest rates, the repercussions are dire. As China swiftly divests from US treasuries, opting for gold instead, the specter of economic turmoil looms large.
It's one thing to be one country versus another with their local currencies. It's another thing when it is the world reserve currency, and a world reserve currency that is broke and accumulating $1 trillion in debt every 90 to 100 days. It took 200 years to do it the first time. It is one thing for a country like ours, where every single country on the planet has had to stockpile dollars in order to buy oil for the last 50 years. And it's another thing altogether when that country, which is supposed to be neutral as the issuer of the reserve currency, can go around making sanctions saying we can do this, but you can't. And if we don't align ideologically, we won't just sanction you the way we did Iran, but we are actually going to confiscate your assets and give them to your foe who you're fighting a war against. And I say this all the time, the way the world looks at us, right? You know, and our media does such a crap job, Ron, of telling the world what's happening, telling the U.S. what's happening. They don't get it. They don't get the way that people look at us. And look at Iraq as an example, right? We invaded them 20 years ago. We destroyed their country looking for weapons of mass destruction, but we're sorry. We didn't find any. Sorry. But here we are 20 years later. We're still occupying their country. Can you imagine if we were invaded and 20 years later, there's still a military force here? And they came under the guise of one thing and well, it wasn't there, but they never left. And we're still sanctioning 14 of their banks for having the audacity to trade with Iranian banks to buy liquid natural gas to cool their homes in the middle of a hot summer. 14 of their banks are being sanctioned, and they made $95 billion in oil revenue last year in 23. The Iraqis did, but they're not allowed to control that. At least not yet. I think there's rumbling, or they may have just reached a deal. But the point is, they asked for $1 billion late in the year last year, and we said it's not a good time. So what have they done? Well, they've made trading in dollars illegal. If you own a business, you will go to jail if you trade in dollars, and your business will be taken by the state. They have formally applied to the BRICS. They are in the process of kicking Western coalition forces out of the country. And now for the past 6 months, since January, there are no dollar bills in the whole country. They have been taken out of all the banks. And when you look at the way that the world views us as hypocritical, we can come in, we can destroy your country, we can topple your regime, we can sanction your banks 20 years after we came in under one pretense that was false, and we can still control your money, your oil revenue, your natural resources. I mean, they look at us as ridiculously, silly, just like us telling China, you do this, we're going to sanction you and Beijing and the banks and yet we just voted to give another $60 billion to the Ukraine, $200 billion, yet $5 billion to build a border wall just because Trump had his name attached to it. Well, that's insane. We can't do that. And look at what's happened. 12 million people have entered this country illegally. So when you have the Congressional Budget Office, which is the last nonpartisan group in Washington, say that in less than 7 years, by 2031, 100% of all tax revenues will just go to pay the interest on the debt and mandatory entitlement spending. Think of it this way, Ron. How does our country remain the powerhouse militarily and financially when, military spending is discretional? We'll have to borrow everything to fund our military and to fund all of these other things that we're doing, borrowing money to give it away. You can't make it up. And not only that, people don't get how big the problem is. Right now, Medicare Part B, as in boy, is $99.5 trillion underfunded. Medicare Part D, 22.1 trillion underfunded, and Social Security, 77 trillion underfunded. That's 175 trillion bucks in underfunded promises. And a trillion seconds ago was 31,688 years ago. I mean, it's just too stupid to be stupid. And put it all, and then come full circle, we have $8.9 trillion in treasuries that need to be reset at higher interest rates this year. And if China's selling treasuries, in fact, they're this close to moving from number 2 to number 3 behind the United Kingdom, where Jim Willey thinks that we're funneling money under the table to the UK and to Ireland to buy our treasuries because no one else wants them, to maintain an illusion that we are not engaging in monetization of the bond market, which is the road to Weimar Republic. So we're supposed to believe that UK and Ireland and Cayman Islands are the 3 biggest holders of our treasuries. If indeed China is selling treasuries, and they were at 3 trillion. Now they're at just over 700 billion. So they're totally shedding, and they're buying gold instead. And if the Fed, which is the number 1 holder of treasuries, is China number 2 for now, if they are quantitatively tightening, letting those treasuries roll off the balance sheet, who the hell is going to buy 10 trillion a year for the next 10 years? It says that we have to do 10 trillion a year. By the way, in February, China dumped 22.7 billion in treasuries. They're dumping treasuries, and that's why rates are rising, and buying gold. That's why there's a floor underneath it, because it can't be sanctioned away from them. And it's massively outperformed the bond market for the last 25 years. It's averaged 9.1% compounding for 25 years since 2000 to where it is now, with no counterparty risk, no sanction, no confiscation, no default risk. It is replacing the Treasury. In a historical context, the Treasury has about that big of a historical footprint, another country's debt as being an asset. So these things are all happening rapidly, but the world looks at us as broke, insolvent, hypocritical, and all flat out stupid. And I think that they are using the leverage of our suppression of the markets, and I want to read something to you in a minute about that, against us. And that's where we're at.
Continuing his analysis, Andy Shechtman sheds light on the ramifications of geopolitical dynamics on the US economy. With the lead economic advisor advocating for the removal of the dollar's reserve status and the weaponization of the currency, Shechtman underscores the perilous path of excessive spending and coercion. While global powers like China and the BRICS pursue cooperative ventures, the US risks alienating itself with its aggressive tactics. As the world seeks alternatives, the dollar's dominance hangs in the balance.
You look at the lead economic advisor to the country, Jared Bernstein, graduated from Columbia University, which is another thing I want to talk with you about. But his thesis is to lose the reserve status. It's a privilege we can no longer afford. I think I've talked with you about this before. Dethrone King Dollar is a report he wrote advocating for the immediate removal of the reserve status. So by weaponizing the dollar, saying to the world, if we don't align ideologically, we're going to sanction and maybe even confiscate your assets. And then, look, I got kids. I want them to grow up in a great environment and have, a clean air and water and everything. But to tell Saudi Arabia, the linchpin and OPEC of the dollar hegemony, that we're going green is about as stupid as you can get. So you weaponize and you say we're not going to use oil much anymore. You get the ball rolling in terms of, global de-dollarization, global de-treasurization at a time when you continue to inflate at a massive rate because you are addicted to spending, borrowing money from the world only to give it to the Ukraine, which makes us more divisive. The Chinese and the BRICS and all, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, the largest regional financial and military group in the world, that, the president of Belarus, I've been saying for 3 years, they will be in BRICS. So will the Eurasian Economic Union. Well, president of Belarus says they need to get into the BRICS immediately. He's calling for a summit, cooperation. They go around the Belt Road Initiative and in the BRICS, they're building roads and bridges and maritime channels and railways and building gold mines and silver mines and oil refineries and oil rigs and all of these things in a cooperative fashion. They are cooperating instead of coercing and being a bully. There is no question about it. There is no question about it that I think the world looks at us as being tyrannical and bully and hypocritical. And yet, the Chinese, you don't see them fighting wars all over the world, do you?
No.
And say what you want about them, but their path is through cooperation rather than coercion. and we choose the other path. And I think it's very interesting to look at things that way, and that's probably why they're growing, and we're starting to become less and less and less of an asset or a currency or a treasury that the world wants to hold because of that.
As we wrap up today's discussion, it's crucial to reflect on the insights shared by Andy Shechtman. From the alarming rate of US debt accumulation to the implications of geopolitical tensions on the dollar's reserve status, the complexities of global economics are laid bare. Shechtman's analysis underscores the urgent need for a paradigm shift in economic policy and international relations. We're at a critical juncture where cooperation, rather than coercion, may hold the key to stability and prosperity.